Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the October 19th, 2016 edition of the Midweek Update. Today happens to be my son's second birthday. Happy birthday, Jonathan. And just so you know, if you're ever watching any of these old videos, yeah, your old man is just as weird as you think. Number 5 story of the week is that Matt Sydal has been arrested in Japan for possession of cannabis. This is a story that broke a couple of days ago. It's a somewhat tragic, we'll go ahead and say, story because of the fact that the Japanese are well known for not really taking any you-know-what when it comes to people who try and bring substances of this nature into their country. He was picked up at the airport in Osaka. He was on his way to perform with New Japan Pro Wrestling, and unfortunately it was discovered that he had what appeared to be a vaporizer of some type with cannabis in the cartridge for that device. From the way it's been reported, he had enough of it that was considered a substantial amount. It could have been a full cartridge for all we know. Fact of the matter is, he's in a pretty significant amount of trouble because in Japan, this type of an offense is punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Yeah, that's a lot for just a simple amount of what amounts to flavored e-cigarette oil or whatever you want to call it there. It's unfortunate because of the fact that it's also been reported that due to some of the injuries that he's incurred throughout his career and also his personal life, you may recall he was in a wreck here within the past couple of years that left him with some pretty severe injuries that some people were concerned that he might not be able to overcome, but he's evidently used marijuana as a way to deal with the pain and the residual effects of that particular incident. It's somewhat questionable, though, that statement was released by a friend of his, sort of in a way to save face with this matter, seeing as how it's also well known that good old Matt there just likes to smoke pot, period. It's unfortunate. It's one of these things where you have to abide by international law as a traveler to these various parts of the world. He's not the first wrestler to have ever gotten into some type of hot water with an issue like this. Guys going back and forth to Canada all the time seemingly pop up and get problems caused by trying to transport whatever across the border, but this is one of the first times that I can recall hearing about it in Japan. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with him and with this situation here, but he could definitely be in a situation where his career is affected for a good long while because of this arrest. Number 4 story of the week is that the Undertaker's health has been called into question. There were some pictures that showed up online here recently of the Undertaker not really making a public appearance. Undertaker doesn't make public appearances. You have a guy who happens to be the Undertaker who gets seen in public occasionally. But there were some pictures of him that surfaced online that were of him in restaurants and just out and about using crutches. And people immediately became very speculative as to what might be going on with the Undertaker because he's a very secretive individual when it comes to his personal life. You don't see a whole lot of talk about him away from the ring, and that's somewhat surprising in this day and age because it seems like everybody wants to have every bit of their information out there anymore, but he's just not like that. To his credit, there was a lot, like we mentioned, of speculation as to what could be going on. People were wondering, does this mean that we've potentially seen the end of his in-ring career? Could he have had a substantial back injury, something along those lines? But it's been reported by PW Insider that he's actually had hip surgery and is using those crutches to help in his recovery and to maintain his mobility while he's healing up. So it doesn't appear to be anything too substantial there. Of course, we're talking about a guy who's been wrestling since 1984, so that's a 30-year career, 30-plus year career, you might as well go ahead and say. And a guy who's been around the world God knows how many times and taken God knows how many bumps as well. So I'm sure his hips and other joints are giving him plenty to complain about right now. But the fact that he's still up and moving and still going on, that able to get around is a real testament to his conditioning and to his resiliency as well. So we're somewhat expecting him to come around from this and to begin potentially preparing for WrestleMania 33. There's also been speculation of what could happen to him as far as that's concerned. Of course, Taker shows up at WrestleMania if and when he wants to. It's just something that he has as a luxury of being the veteran that he is. There's been talk that the plan for that show, if he does choose to participate, could be him in a program with John Cena, who we've also been hearing some talk about that there could be potential for him to return from his most recent hiatus where he's filming some TV programs and whatnot, for them to be bringing him back as a villain yeah, that's some somewhat serious talk we've heard, so we'll have to wait and see what goes on there. Could see Undertaker and Cena, WrestleMania 33, if Undertaker wants to be at WrestleMania 33, that is. Number 3 story of the week is a roundup of items from WWE NXT. A lot going on around developmental these days. Very exciting place to be. I really am hoping that whenever my family takes a vacation to Florida here in a couple of weeks, that we'll be able to attend something related to NXT, but that's going to remain to be seen here because their taping schedule hasn't been released yet for that particular part of the month of November. But regardless, we had 3 items come around the NXT bin that were very interesting and wanted to share with you this week. First and foremost being the announcement that Mickie James is returning to the fold in WWE. Who knew? Very exciting to see Mickie James back in the company because she's been one of the talents who's really developed away from WWE, who's gotten a lot of attention after having left the company. But the fact that she's coming back to NXT means a lot. She's one of several veterans who have given credence to the talent there and the high level of competition that's in NXT. She will be returning at the NXT Toronto TakeOver special, and she'll be competing against Asuka in a match for the NXT Women's Championship. So pretty awesome there to hear about that story and the fact that she'll be returning, and that match should be excellent. Some other news there that is also of the excellent variety is the fact that Roderick Strong has made his debut in the company. He will be participating in the Dusty Rhodes Classic tag team tournament that's going on right now. He will probably, I believe if I remember correctly, be on the show that is on tonight on the WWE Network. He'll be debuting in a tag team with Austin Aries, so one of his old Ring of Honor cohorts there, coming together again to form a tag team alliance in the Dusty Rhodes Classic. Should be very interesting to see how his progression comes along. Are they potentially going to have the two of them continue as a tag team? Is this something else that could be going on there, leading to maybe a feud between the two of them? Who knows? But the fact of the matter is, with Roderick Strong making his debut, the rich continue to get richer, and that is NXT as a whole. Unfortunately, there was a bit of a withdrawal, for lack of a better way of putting it, or to use the pun I had established there, from the bank of NXT here within the past week or two, as Hideo Itami, unfortunately, has been injured again. As you may remember, he just was returning from an injury here not too long ago, and lo and behold, he's got another injury. This time around, is to his neck. Unfortunately, at a live event, he did get a bit of a botched power slam from Riddick Moss. Wound up looking as though it kind of dragged his head along the canvas, and don't believe that it was too significant of an injury, but when you're talking about a neck problem, it's something that has to be, of course, taken seriously because that's potential paralysis and all kinds of bad things there. So it didn't seem to be it was going to be an injury that required surgery, but it is going to require him to take some time off to heal properly. So he's back on the shelf for the time being. That, of course, creates a problem because the fact that he and Kota Ibushi had been entered as a tag team in the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. So we'll have to see what happens there. I feel like I've said we have to see what happens a lot on this program, but it's just the nature of things. A lot going on though in NXT, a lot of cool stuff happening down there. I know we said we had 3 items, but it's just been reported earlier today about the fact that Tommy End and Crazy Mary Dobson have both reported to the Performance Center. So here again, a lot of cool talent showing up at NXT these days. A lot of great things happening at developmental. Number 2 story of the week is Goldberg's triumphant return to WWE. This was a pretty cool moment, I'll have to go ahead and say, because this has been 12 years where we've really not seen much of Goldberg. We haven't really seen him at all in wrestling. Seen him on TV a couple of times. He's had a little bit of a foray into reality television, but he's been gone for the most part. Haven't seen him around wrestling or any type of competition, period. So it was great to, as a fan, see him return. That good old entrance of his where he walks out in front of the sparklers and breathes out the big ball of smoke seemingly. It was really something else to see, and it was really something to hear his comments as well, because he gave a very impassioned promo talking about the fact that he had missed performing, he had missed competing, but he had also very much missed the opportunity to perform for children as a living superhero, specifically for his son, who I believe is in the area of about 10 years old. And being a father of a young man myself, I can very much sympathize with his statements and with his desire to be a stand-up role model for a young man like him and for young men and women everywhere for that matter. So it was very cool to see him come back out there to give the talk that he did. It was kind of funny that he came out wearing this big motorcycle jacket, and you could tell that he was hot under all those lights. But even so, very cool to see him come out and give a talk like that. It was exactly what needed to be done in terms of establishing him as the true blue hero in this scenario. Of course, nobody would really take Lesnar as being anything other than a villain, although I'm sure that when the match happens, you'll have plenty of people who are divided in terms of who they want to cheer for. But I think that's where Heyman will come into play in making sure that Lesnar gets perceived as the villain in the whole scenario. But regardless, it does appear that they will be having a match sooner than later. Probably not Hell in a Cell, probably going to be a Survivor Series, so they got a little bit of time to build towards this thing there. But it does appear that this will be, whenever it does happen, Goldberg's last match, because he was talking very pointedly and saying that he's got one more in him. So we'll have to see what happens there, but definitely something to look forward to when we have Lesnar and Goldberg going at it again in a WWE ring. And the number one story of the week, of course, is the fact that TNA's problems are continuing to grow. And growing may be a little bit too soft of a word. I don't know what more can really be used for a hole that's deepening by the second, seemingly, but it's getting bad. It's actually getting really bad. We'll try and go through the list of things that have happened here, and I've got some notes to go over as far as what we've heard of and what seems to be the case with TNA right now. But it kicked off a few days ago, actually close to a week ago, with the news that Billy Corgan, who of course is the president of TNA Wrestling, was suing his own company. Yeah, suing the company, also suing Dixie Carter and a couple of other individuals behind the scenes there with TNA as well, presumably over money owed to him for the fact that he's been throwing cash into what amounts to a dumpster fire and not getting anything really out of it. Of course, we all know by now that he's very much interested in buying the company and wanting to do something with it, but for one reason or another, nothing's going forward there in terms of an actual transaction. Moving on from there, it turned out that the state of Tennessee issued a lien against TNA Wrestling for back taxes having been owed due to various pieces of property. They're to a point, the state of Tennessee is to where they can actually begin to seize this property. That is bad. That is very bad. Because when you're talking about an actual government entity wanting to come after your property, that means you've had a good length of time in which to actually pay those taxes and have not made good on those bills. So that is one thing that is very, very, very substantial in this whole mix of things, and saying, okay, well, how long have they not been in the black in terms of having a positive cash flow? Because that kind of is indicative of in the red scenario for a long time, but we've got some other stuff that would indicate that as well. Namely the fact that American Express earlier this year, back in July, matter of fact, filed a lawsuit against TNA Wrestling for the fact that they were not paying back credit card bills related to travel expenses. And it's in the area of $250,000, more than that, matter of fact. $250,000, you might as well say, in credit card bills owed by TNA. And what kind of blows me away is that on top of all this, you've got some people within the company who are continuing to just sort of stand around as Rome Burns, for lack of a better phrase, playing their little fiddles. This is a little fiddle right here, saying, okay, well, all is well within the company. We're still getting paid. We're still producing a TV show. And that is Jeremy Borash. He was on the Taz podcast here a couple days ago, and he made a statement along the lines of half of what you've heard isn't true. A lot of what's been going on and what's been reported in the news, according to him, is totally false. And going off of what he said there about the half of it being true, well, which half? Even with half of it being true, that half is still pretty, bad. I can't use an expletive strong enough to really explain how bad the situation is now, because the company is to a point to where its value is lower than the amount of money that they owe. I do not see how anyone could look at TNA based on the amount of debt that this company has and say, hey, I'm willing to get involved with that at this point in time. I think I can salvage that. It's amazing. It really is a dumpster fire. It is just a pile of hot garbage to take a quote from the New Day there. Really, really mind-numbingly bad in terms of how this whole thing has gone. And for it to have all been sort of revealed here at one moment in time. So this wasn't like this took a couple of weeks to progress. This all came out literally within the past 7 days. So yeah, just crazy to think of how bad and how quickly this whole thing has gotten. It's been also reported that some talent are on the verge of walking out of the company if they don't get their payment that's due coming soon. Of course, they did just get finished taping TV throughout the rest of the year, so we'll have to see if those shows do come to fruition in terms of being broadcast on Pop TV or internationally. But yeah, just real bad scenario all the way around for TNA Wrestling. But on the positive side of things, wrestling here in the Carolinas is on fire. It is on fire. Yeah, it's on fire. Things are doing really well around the Carolinas. To the point that we have 14 shows happening in or around the Mid-Atlantic this weekend. We do include North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia in that number. But yeah, 14. Lots of opportunities for you to get out there and see a show this weekend, including shows promoted by top companies like America's Most Liked Wrestling, PWX Wrestling, WrestleForce, Why We Wrestle, and others. A lot of cool stuff happening. A lot of great things happening. Do want to point out one interesting note about these shows this weekend. PWX and AML are both running this Saturday, 22nd, in North Carolina. That's happened at least once before, and it was a little bit of controversy at that point in time. Haven't heard as much controversy about it this time around. However, it is worth pointing out, seeing as how they are considered the two top companies in North Carolina, and the fact that this time around they are within 90 minutes of one another. PWX is going to be having their show in Hickory, North Carolina. AML has theirs in High Point. You're talking about roughly 90 minutes worth of travel between those two cities. So, fans in that part of the world, guess what? You are definitely eating at a buffet here this weekend, seeing as how you got a lot to choose from and a lot of opportunities to see some great wrestling all over the state of North Carolina, not just in those two cities, but definitely if you're in range of those two, you got a big chance. Also want to point out WrestleForce this Sunday, and also Palmetto Championship Wrestling has one of their weekly shows on Friday as well. But enough pointing out specific individuals. Let's go ahead and roll the posters and get you caught up on what's happening this weekend. There you have it. That's our coverage of the events that are coming your way this weekend. If you were a wrestler, a promoter, or in some way involved with a wrestling promotion, and you didn't see your poster in that part of the show, it's because we didn't know about it. We do our best to produce social media to keep abreast of what's happening in this part of the world, but we do miss things. That said, if you would please send in your information via YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, email, any of the communication methods that we have out there, be glad to get it on here on the YouTube show. I'll also be glad to put it on Facebook for you in one of the upcoming event flyer albums that we have on there. because a big part of what we do here with Rasslin with Redbeard is to promote the local shows and talent that are in this area. Do appreciate you guys tuning in. Appreciate you also considering the possibility of subscribing to the channel. If you enjoy this program and also others, please do that. Also, please give us a like. That will let me know that I'm doing a good job with this here thing. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll see you next week.